Could Garrett Greene be the most underrated quarterback returning in college football for the 2024 season? Well, the guest I'm bringing on the show today, he actually thinks so, and we're going to talk about that along with some other interesting topics. And we're going to do it right after this word from my sponsor. Ladies and gentlemen, this episode is brought to you by Dutch Miller Automotive, where friends and family pricing means you get the best deal right up front on any new or pre-loved vehicle in stock every time. With brands like Chevrolet, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, Kia, Hyundai, Ford, GMC, Buick, and Subaru, the Dutch Miller Automotive family is always growing and ready to put you in the car or truck you've been searching for. Check out our inventory across West Virginia at DutchMillerAuto.com or come in today to the home of friends and family pricing, only at a Dutch Miller Automotive store near you. What is up? Welcome in to another edition of Couz's Corner. Belly yourself up to the bar, make yourself comfortable, and let me serve you up another shot of top-shelf college football content. Here at Couz's Corner, we do top-shelf college football analysis about West Virginia, the Big 12, and, of course, everybody's favorite topic, conference realignment. If you like that kind of content, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. We'd love to have you as part of the family if you're not already. On today's show, we have a very special guest. We're going to bring on someone who covers college football for Pro Football Focus. His name is Mr. Max Chadwick, and he has his own YouTube channel and podcast called Preferred Walk On, which is Pro Football Focus's college football show. Max, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks so much for having me on.
Absolutely. I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to join me.
Yeah, of course, man.
A lot of people may not understand exactly what Pro Football Focus does. How do they get their grades? What do they look at? Can you kind of explain how that works?
Yeah, of course. So we try to do the almost impossible task of grading every single player on every single play in every single game. We do that for every NFL game. We do that for every college football game, FBS and FCS, and even some D2 and D3 stuff as well. As you can imagine, it's a very time-intensive process. Now, I luckily am not one of the people that is grading and not one of the people that has to watch every single player and every single play and every single game. But we have a ton of really talented data collectors that do that. And basically how they do it is they watch every player, obviously on every play, and they grade them on a -2 to +2 scale in like 0.5 increments. So basically the best play you could make, you would get a +2 in our grading system. A really great play that a player makes, we'll get a 1.5. A really good play, 1. Good play is 0.5. And then kind of what's expected of you would get a 0. And then, as you can imagine, it would be the opposite. So the worst play you can make is -2, really bad play like that. So you do all that. You combine them all together. You get all the grades from every play for every player. And then we put it into a 0 to 100 scale to make it more digestible to us and to the consumer and to, honestly, teams that use it as well. So that's how we come up with the grades for every player. I know some people think that, how do we know what the player is supposed to do on every play? Well, we are fortunate enough to have a lot of former players, a lot of coaches, like Bobby Slowick, who was almost hired as a head coach, is now the Texans offensive coordinator. He worked at PFF for a little bit. He really helped us come up with our grading process. Zach Robinson, who is now the Falcons offensive coordinator, he also worked at PFF for a little bit. We've had a lot of former players kind of tell us, hey, on this play, you should be looking for this, on this play like that. So our guys are very well trained. It's not some Joe Schmo, like even me. Like I would not be trusted to grade every player, even though I do cover the sport. It's a very rigorous training process. Okay. And we have people that check over the grades after the initial grader makes his or her determination. We have another, like a more seasoned professional, look at the grades until they go out officially. So very rigorous process. It's more than people think. It's not perfect. Don't get me wrong. Their grades are never going to be perfect. I always caution against that for people who think that they are. But they are, I think they are as good as you can get in terms of figuring out exactly how good every player has been.
Okay. Thanks for explaining that.
Yeah. So
you have former players and coaches doing the grading, not just talking heads like me, for example.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I don't know how many.
That's good to know.
I'm not in that in those groups. So I don't know how many. I know Bruce Gradkowski, when he wasn't, I know he's now actually a coach somewhere, but he actually helped out with a lot of the quarterback grading. He used to be an NFL quarterback for a long time. I don't know how many former players and coaches are actually doing the grading now, But like I said, they trained the people that are doing
I
the
got
grading.
you. So
we do have actually my co-host Dalton on my show. He's one of the people that does a lot of the grading. He's one of the ones that has to put in a ton of man hours to do all this, which is it's a long time, I bet. But yeah, so yeah, they're the ones that get trained to do it by more professional people that understand the game.
Okay. Does opponent play into it at all? Whether you're playing a Power 5 team or a Group of 5 team or any of that, does that play into the grading at all, or is it strictly, how the player does on a specific play?
It's strictly how a player does a specific play. So that exactly is why Dalton and I's job of, ranking these players and saying how good it is. That's again, like some players that are Group of 5 players have super high grades. Like the highest graded running back this past season was Ashton Ginty, who was in my top 10 running backs. He had like a 95 grade. He was number 8 on my list. So you can't just, you can't just go off the grades. You got to say, okay, this guy was playing Mountain West competition. This guy was playing SEC, Big 10, Big 12 competition. So yeah, it is strictly, there's nothing that takes into account your competition level, because that would be, I don't even know how, it'd be almost an impossible thing to try to grade it off that. So it's not that. It's strictly just how you're doing against the opponent you are. So that's another thing you have to keep into account too, is like, okay, some guys really beat up on the lesser opponents, but then struggle against the better opponents. That's something that, as my job, it's my job to kind of look at that and say, okay, who actually are the best players, not just maybe who were the highest graded ones. Because that's not always a one-to-one comparison.
So the grade itself is not based on the opponent, but when you do your rankings, you do look at opponent.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because like I said, there would be so many Group of 5 players that were the highest graded that I'd have number 1 or 2 on my list. And you look at them like, what are you talking about, dude? So again, that's something I have to take into account. And I have taken into account a lot is competition level and how well these guys are playing against, actual, because NFL really isn't, the competition level isn't really, there's no competition, gap. So it's easy to kind of look at that. In college, like you mentioned, it's very wildly different. So yeah, it is my job to kind of separate the top players that are still really good players at the Group of 5 level, but are they actually better than some of the Power 5 players who graded out lower? That's kind of my job to figure that out.
That's fair. Okay. Now, a couple of weeks ago, there were some controversial comments made on a show, on the Pat McAfee show, actually, about PFF. I think it was J.J. Watt who spoke up and basically trashed PFF, for lack of a better term.
Yep.
Can you speak to those comments and what JJ had to say about PFF?
Yeah, I think his exact words were "PFF sucks. Have a great day." I think that was what he said at the end of it. We actually, funny enough, we made a shirt that says "I hate PFF," and we were trying to give one out to JJ. I gotta buy one. I gotta buy one still, because listen, we are very controversial. People don't love the fact that we grade players in every play. Again, they don't really know how rigorous it is and how rigorous the training process is. They kind of think it's just Joe Schmo doing it when, like I said, it's not. Listen, I love JJ Watt. I have no ill will towards him. Funnily enough, he was one of the highest graded players we've ever had in PFF history. So it's kind of funny to hearing him kind of say, "Oh, it's a sham." When it's like, dude, you graded out super well. I think I think why he's so upset with it is that we have always had Myles Garrett as one of our top edges and always kind of been above TJ Watt, his little brother. So obviously he's sticking up for his brother, which I can honestly respect as a brother myself. And then also like CJ Stroud, I remember one game was a little bit lower graded than what his box score stats would indicate. And obviously as a former Texan, he was sticking up for his, the quarterback of his franchise as well. So JJ, listen, he is not the first player that has been upset with PFF. There have been many in the past. So again, like I said, we're controversial sometimes. It's not perfect. It's something I would tell JJ, listen, man, we are not saying that these grades are perfect, but I do think they are a better indicator of how good a player actually is than just pure passing yards and passing touchdowns, because they're not all created equall, honestly. A 80-yard screen pass is 80 yards, whether or not he threw it 80 yards downfield. Like that's, again, it's not all created equal. So I understand the qualms that JJ and other players have with it. I think he's maybe a little bit too harsh, obviously. But I don't know if a lot of players understand how much goes into it. But listen, he can have his opinion for sure. And I know a lot of other players kind of share that same opinion with him.
Right. Once again, we are joined by Max Chadwick with Preferred Walk-On and Pro Football Focus. You can find his work on YouTube and all Spotify, I'm assuming, Max.
Yep.
iTunes, the whole bit, anywhere you find your podcast. You can find him on X at Max Chadwick CFB. For those of you who may be listening, it's spelled just like it sounds. Max Chadwick, CFB.
Yep.
All right, now let's dig into some West Virginia talk, Max. The main reason I brought you on the show, and I know West Virginia fans are excited to hear you talk about this. A few days ago, you put up, and I'm going to share a graphic for those who are watching that you put up on your page, on your X page, with with West Virginia quarterback Garrett Greene, and it says Garrett Greene is the most underrated quarterback in college football entering next year, and that came directly from you.
It did.
So, what, in your opinion, obviously that has Mountaineer fans excited as ever because we obviously feel the same, but you know we might be biased, right? Because we're looking through gold and blue glasses. What is it about Garrett Greene's game in your mind? We know he graded out well last year. He was one of the top graded quarterbacks in the country, top 10, actually. In your mind, as someone who ranks the quarterbacks, what stood out to him and makes you think he's most underrated?
Well, first of all, I appreciate you acknowledging that, you know, some fans can have rose-tinted glasses. Because I'll admit,
no doubt.
With these lists I've been putting out, I think every school in the country has been upset with me about, listen, there's only 10 guys I can put on these lists, guys. Like, I can't put 133 players on this list. So I think it's pretty funny that you said that, because it's just so funny seeing schools, coaches, players, fans come at me and just be like, where's this guy? How is this guy not on the list? I'm like, dude, there's only 10 guys I can put on here. I'm sorry. Garrett Greene, I love, though. I had him number 7 on my list for quarterbacks entering next year. What I love about him and why I think the box score numbers will not tell you the whole story with him, and I've seen some analysts have Garrett Greene as one of the worst Power 5 quarterbacks, and I disagree with that, is that this guy is a big game hunter. That is what he is. So what that means is he's going to take shots downfield. His average at the target, which basically is how far you're throwing down the field on every pass attempt, was 13.5 yards, which was higher than any other Power 5 quarterback. So what that will say is, okay, he's taking deep shots basically every single play. His completion percentage is going to be lower. He actually had the lowest adjusted completion rate, which basically, or actually the third lowest, excuse me. Adjusted completion rate is basically your completion percentage plus any drops that your receivers have. So basically, stuff that isn't the quarterback's fault. He had the third worst adjusted completion percentage among Power 5 quarterbacks, but still had a really high grade because he was pushing the ball downfield more than other quarterbacks. So, when you throw it downfield, obviously you have a less likely chance of completing it than if you were throwing a short ball. He was phenomenal this past season. He had actually the highest big-time throw rate in the country at 10.2%. Also had 13 rushing touchdowns, which tied for first among all FBS quarterbacks. Also 6th among Power 5 quarterbacks, about 773 rushing yards. He's really, really good. And what I love about him, too, he played behind a great offensive line, sure. He also did a really good job of not taking sacks. He actually had the lowest pressure to sack conversion rate in the country as well. So I love Garrett Greene. I think he's got a really good arm. He pushes the ball downfield. He is really good at not taking sacks. And then also he's a really, really good mobile quarterback as well. I think he's super underrated. I think that he could actually have some NFL evaluators excited about him next year as maybe a day 2 or early day 3 pick. I really like Garrett Greene a lot. And like I said, his box score numbers won't tell the whole story with him, which is why I think PFF is so valuable, because what he does on the field is much more than what his completion percentage or yards or touchdowns would say.
Yeah, I love that assessment. And what a lot of people may not understand about Garrett, he basically missed 2 full games last year. Now, the Pitt game doesn't go down as a missed game because he played a series before he got hurt. He scored 29 touchdowns either through the air or on the ground in 11 games. That's pretty darn impressive, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I read a stat. I think I saw it on Rivals. I'm not sure if they got it from Pro Football Focus, or if they got it somewhere else, but I read a stat that his rushing touchdown number of 13 was 10th all time among running quarterbacks in history of college football. Wow. So I think it was tied for 10th, but it was 10th.
Yeah.
So that's pretty impressive. I mean, I've had people on my show before that, and not just on my show, but even, reading articles and whatnot of other analysts who all they want to talk about is completion percentage. And I'm like, you've got it. There is a lot more to the game than complete. Yes, it's important. I'm not saying it's not. And it does need to be taken into account. It matters, especially at that position. But man, when you look at when he makes his best plays at crunch time, number one, typically, whether it be running the ball, converting on third down passes, whatever. as us West Virginia fans like to say, he's got that dog in him, you know. He seems to be a big game guy, big moment guy. And like you said, he loves to push the ball down the field. Now, the one area, I'll ask you your opinion on this, and I'm sure you probably agree. The one area we feel like he needs to improve on is his short game. He's not as accurate in the intermediate and short stuff. I mean, he's even admitted that openly himself. Do you agree with that assessment?
I think that's a good assessment. Yeah, I think that's kind of the thing. So that's why, again, the completion percentage is going to look bad. And again, that's why I wanted to point to the stat of this guy is pushing the ball downfield more than any other Power 5 quarterback is, even more than like someone like Jalen Monroe, who also was like throwing deep shots, it seems like every single pass attempt. So, yeah, I think the short and intermediate stuff, that's something that I think he's got to do a better job of. And I think he's got to play within the offense a little bit more of, don't swing for the fences every time. Maybe take the single, take the double when you can get them. That's something I think he can improve on for sure. Listen, he's a great deep ball thrower. He's a great mobile threat, but he does have to improve in the 0 to 19 yards area of the field. That's something that, I agree. I think he can do a better job of, like I said, just taking the easy singles and doubles and you can get them instead of swinging for a home run every single at bat. So I definitely think that that's an area of improvement that Garrett Greene can go under. But even if he doesn't improve at that, I still think he's, again, one of the top 10-ish quarterbacks in college football entering next year.
Yeah, if one big key for him too, for us fans anyway, is can he stay healthy? He has, because he runs the ball so much, and because he's kind of a smaller guy, he does have a tendency to get hurt, and he's been injured a couple different times now throughout his career, ankles, things like that, concussions, those types of things in the last 2 to 3 years. So hopefully he's, late last season he started sliding a lot more. Hopefully he continues that next year because we need that guy. He's going to be big as far as West Virginia's success next year. We love Nico, his backup. We think Nico has a chance to be a star. But right now, Garrett is that guy, I think, to carry this team forward.
Yeah, I agree. I think Garrett Greene is one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12 going into next year. I think I actually had him as my number one. Actually, no. So Shedeur Sanders would be my number one quarterback in the Big 12.
That's fair. I had this exact same placement in my rankings.
Yes, yeah, I think Shedeur is special, man. I think Colorado got overrated in a lot of areas last year, but I think the one that they're not overrated in is under center. And I think Shedeur Sanders could be an NFL first-round pick next year. He's special. I think he really is a special quarterback. But I think Garrett Greene is right behind him at number 2 in the Big 12. And you got Noah Fafita from Arizona right there with him at number 3 in the Big 12 next year as well. So, awesome. Yeah, actually, it's a pretty fun quarterback conference. It's really fun conference overall in the Big 12. I think it's a wide open conference next year. And West Virginia could make some noise, honestly, with guys like Garrett Greene, Jaheim White, some pieces on the offensive line I really like as well, some defensive guys I like as well. I think West Virginia could make some noise next year. Yeah,
you guys at Pro Football Focus really like a lot of West Virginia's individual players, I've noticed. Again, for those of you who, as a reminder, we're speaking with Max Chadwick from Pro Football Focus and the Preferred Walk-On podcast. You can also find him at Max Chadwick CFB on X. But, Wyatt Milam's a guy that I think you guys were really high on, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, my next week, I will have my top 10 offensive tackles and interior offensive linemen coming out. Okay. And Wyatt Milam I could actually spoil it for you right now if you want. He is number 5 on my list for offensive tackles next year. Awesome. So, yeah, I think he's a stud. Yeah.
Good deal. Yeah. But it's, Zach Frazier's going to be missed greatly, obviously, up front. And so will Doug Nestor, for that matter. Doug Nestor, I don't think he rated as highly as far as Pro Football Focus grades, but he was a very solid piece for West Virginia last year, really for the last 3 years on that offensive line.
Yeah.
Let's switch gears a minute. Let's actually, before we move on, you mentioned defense, because defense has kind of been the one question mark for West Virginia in this offseason. They've obviously brought in a lot of portal guys. Who's the one or two guys on that defense that stands out for you, whether it be portal transfers, whether it be, guys who are coming back?
Yes, good question. So there's one guy who I'm going to have. Okay, so he might not be a top 10 player, but I think he might be my honorable mention, and that is Aubrey Burks, the safety. Okay. I'm a big fan of him. He actually played super well in 2022. Kind of had a little bit of he still was really good this past season, don't get me wrong, but he kind of had a little bit down compared to what he did in 2022. I haven't finalized my safety rankings yet, but right now Aubrey would be number 11, which would mean he'd be the honorable mention for me. I really like him. Like I said, there are some, defensive pieces or defensive areas that West Virginia can improve at. But one that I think they really have a good player at his safety in Aubrey Burks. I think he's a really versatile player for them. And like I said, he might not be one of my top 10 returning safeties, but he is really, really close to it. So I'm a big fan of Aubrey Burks' game. Yeah,
we picked – I noticed you had T.J. Jackson, the defensive tackle we just picked up from Troy. I noticed you had him on one of your lists the other day, I think.
Yes, yeah, he graded out highly. He won't be in my top 10 overall because, again, that's something, like we said before, you have to take into account the competition level that he had at Troy in the Sun Belt. So he won't be in my top 10, but I do like him, though. I think he's a talented player. He's someone that I actually he probably would be in my top 15 to 20 defensive tackles. I actually watched some of his tape when I was putting together that list. But, yeah, I'm a big fan of him, and I'm excited to see what he can do now at the Big 12 level.
I don't know how I might be catching you on the spot here, and if I am, I apologize. But we got 2 commitments yesterday from 2 Northwestern defensive backs, Garrett Hollis and Jaheim Joseph.
Okay. Yes, I know. I've heard of Jaheim a little bit. So I watched Jaheim a little bit when I was putting on my safety rankings. He actually really played well this past season. He had an 81.1 coverage grade. He actually is another guy who I was very close to having in my list. I like him a lot. I think he's a talented player. I think Jaheim Joseph could definitely be someone that could be a top 10 safety. The only thing I would say is safety is probably one of the best positions in college football next year, maybe right behind running back, which is why I was devastated to not have Jaheim White in my top 10. I think Jaheim White's an absolute superstar, and what he did as a true freshman was stupid. But I think Jaheim Joseph is a guy. Again, he's unfortunately at a position where it's loaded in college football, but he is definitely a really, really talented player. And yeah, I mean, between Aubrey Burks and Jaheim Joseph, that's one of the better safety duos, if not top 2 or 3 safety duo in college football entering next year.
Wow. That's great to hear.
Yeah.
It's great to hear. Yeah, he was definitely a ball hawk back there from what little bit I saw and read about him. And then his teammate Garrett Hollis he started the entire season last year in the Big Ten. So, he's nothing to sneeze at either. That's a corner position. And what I love about him is he's 6'2".
Yeah.
I have a 6'2" corner is rare, especially at West Virginia. We haven't had that in a while. So we're excited about it. And hopefully he can add some depth. Those are the 2 positions that West Virginia needed the most help at. And they've been able to go out and address that in the offseason, thankfully. Yeah,
and his size, I think, where it really shows up is in the run game. He actually has been a super highly graded run defender for PFF over the last couple seasons. So you don't really see that for corners too often. They're kind of the least physical players on the field on defense usually. But he actually has been a really, really good run defender for Northwestern over the last couple of years. So that's something that he should bring to the Mountaineers next year too.
Yeah. And who knows? They may end up moving him to. West Virginia's coaching staff, they like defensive backs who are versatile and can play multiple positions.
Yeah.
So, matter of fact, they've even hinted that they might do something different with Aubrey Burks next year. So we don't know what they have in store. They're supposed to move to a true 3-4 defense next year instead of the kind of a 4-2-5 type scheme they've been playing. So there's going to be some schematic changes. It'll be interesting to see where these guys fit into that.
Yeah.
Switching gears real quick. Let's talk about just college football overall. I know you've been on some other shows talking about the college football playoff, the new 5+7 model. I know there's been some reports out there that the SEC and Big Ten could end up breaking away. They may make some demands as far as what they want in the new CFP, all that. What, in your opinion, do you see as someone who covers the sport on a regular basis? Where do you see the sport going in the next 5 to 10 years? Do you see the SEC and Big Ten eventually breaking away from everybody else or not?
Man, it unfortunately sounds like we're getting close to that. I don't know. I'm not close. I think we're still a few years away from that really being a possibility. But I think the SEC and Big Ten are kind of understanding like, hey, we are the pillars of the sport right now. Like we have by far the most talented conferences in college football. Big 12 seems to be in a good spot. Thankfully, ACC is a little more rocky with Florida State trying to get out of there, and potentially some other schools want to get out of there too if Florida State leaves. So it's a weird spot college football is in right now. Obviously, the Pac-12 is extinct basically right now. It's definitely a weird spot that we're in. Now we're going to the 12-team playoff era, the 5-7 format where you're guaranteed to have 5 conference champions make it. It's going to be weird. I can understand the Big Ten and SEC being like, hey, we're only guaranteed one of the spots. Meanwhile, we have by far the best conferences. I mean, you're probably going to see the other 7 spots pretty much dominated by the Big Ten and SEC as for the at-large team. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting thing for college football in the next few years is just how the Big Ten and SEC, maybe even Big 12 and ACC, maybe they just separate from the NCAA altogether. It's going to be a really interesting thing for college football to go through probably the next few years, honestly.
Yeah, I actually read right before we started recording, I actually read a tweet from, I think it was Brett McMurphy, who said Kirk Schultz, he interviewed Kirk Schultz, the president of Washington State, and apparently one of the proposals that was made, I guess yesterday in their meeting, was for the SEC, or that he didn't say specifically SEC, but he said for one conference to get at least 4 automatic bids to the new CFP format. And obviously he said, if that happens with one conference, it's going to happen for the other one. That would ensure that they got at least 8 of the 12 spots every single season.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, I doubt anybody else is going to agree to that.
Yeah.
But the problem is we're in a state now to where if they don't get what they want, they'll just say, screw you, we're going to do it anyway. And we'll just go do our own thing. I hope that doesn't happen. But man, it sure seems like it's heading in that direction. And obviously, as a fan of a Big 12 team, I don't want to see that. But I would imagine every team out there now that might even be on the cusp of getting in one of those conferences or even have a shot is probably scrambling to try to do so. I would imagine,
Oh man. Yeah. It's going to be insane. I know one of the things that is pretty funny about the whole 5 and 7 format is Notre Dame. And I don't think I don't think Notre Dame has an issue with that. I just think it's funny how Notre Dame can be 12-0, be the best team in the country, number 1 in every ranking. And the highest they could be is number 5 in the playoff, because they don't play in a conference and they don't play in a conference title game. Therefore, they can't be a conference champion. So I think that's pretty funny how, which is, again, they agreed to it. Their president, or I thought George is on the committee, so they obviously agreed to it. But I think it's pretty funny how you could have the number 1 team in America be the number 5 seed in the playoff. And that could honestly happen at one of these years, just because Notre Dame is not affiliated with the conference. So, yeah, I think you're going to see a lot of Group of 5 teams desperately try to get into a Power 5 conference, just because, that seems to be the way we're trending, is just the Power 5 is kind of going to be, it always was the upper echelon, but it seems like they're trying to actually separate the two now.
Yeah. But you don't foresee a future where the SEC and Big Ten are separate even from the other two?
Potentially. I think that only happens if they really get upset. And I think right now they're kind of testing how much power they actually have over college football, which is honestly a lot. I mean, you look at those, like I said, those 2 conferences are pretty clearly the top 2 conferences. I think they're kind of testing their limits right now. I think if the committee doesn't make at least some concessions, they might eventually, but I don't think that's something that they want to do. I think that they understand how much that would alter the sport in probably a negative way. I don't think they want to do that. I think that's kind of something that they'd only do if their hand was forced, honestly. So I think they're going to try to figure things out and make sure that they obviously get what they deserve or what they feel that they deserve. I don't know if they're really going to resort to drastic measures like that just yet, but it could happen though if things don't change.
Yeah. I sure hope not. I definitely hope not. Because like I said, my team, could very well get left out of that. Probably would get left out of that. I mean, there's a chance if they expand to 24 teams each, there's a chance West Virginia gets a spot in the SEC, maybe, because we actually almost got in the SEC, I don't know, 12, 13 years ago. But they ended up taking Missouri over West Virginia at the end because they wanted that St. Louis market, I think.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I mean, West Virginia, they're kind of one of those brands that are probably just outside of as far as brand recognition and fan bases and that kind of thing. We're in a small state and that really hurts. So, but I think market size is probably going to matter less now because everything's going to streaming anyway.
Yeah.
So how big your state is or populations, what does that matter now that if everything's going to be streaming anyway? It's all about, will your fans stream the games at the end of the day, right?
Right, exactly. And I think a lot of stuff honestly goes to on-field performance too. I think if the teams that perform the best on the field are probably going to be the teams that obviously are getting more love nationally, and then obviously that there'd be coveted teams. I'm with you, man. I graduated. I'm a Penn State fan, so Penn State seems to be fine, obviously in the Big Ten. But I graduated from Syracuse, and Syracuse is not a very powerhouse football ACC school. So I'm kind of one of the ones that's like, man, if the ACC goes in a bad way, Syracuse would not be a school. I don't think that would be coveted by the Big Ten. So that's something that I'm kind of I'm not worried about it yet, but it's something you have to have an eye on too. It's like, man, like, I really hope the ACC and Big 12 kind of survive this, because if not, they're going to be a lot of, like, you could see like more Oregon States and more Washington States where these schools just get screwed over. You're going to see a lot more of those. So that's why I'm kind of hoping that we're past that now. I'm hoping that we kind of can come to an agreement with all this, but it's going to be interesting, man. I'm excited to see what happens.
Yeah, me too. Well, Max, before we get out of here, I'm going to give you a chance to plug your work and let everybody know where to find you at.
Yeah, for sure. So I actually, you can find all my stuff at pff.com. Like I said, top 10, every position's coming out. Top 10 tight ends just dropped this morning. And then also Preferred Walk-On, which is, I think will be actually renamed to PFF's College Football Show, maybe even next week. But that is where you can find me and my co-host Dolan talking all things college football, talking all things NFL draft, honestly, right now as well. You can find that on YouTube and then wherever you get your podcasts, whether that be Google, Apple, Spotify, whatever. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Since you mentioned NFL draft, I've got to ask you this before we go. Where do you think Zach Frazier ends up?
Ooh, I know he's got some injury concerns, but he has been one of the best centers in college football over the last couple of years. I think he could be. Let me see, actually. So I'm actually not the draft analyst, so I know I'm a huge college guy, but I do know the draft enough. But let me see actually where our draft guy, Trevor Sycamore, who I think is one of the best draft analysts, if not the best. He has Zach Frazier number 34 overall right now. So that's a guy that Trevor thinks top of the second round, and 34. I mean, that's very close to 32, which is a first round pick. So I don't think he will be a first round pick. I don't think Trevor thinks that either, but Trevor thinks he's worthy of being one of the top second round picks. And yeah, he could be an early day 2 pick just because of how dominant he's been for honestly 3+ years now. So yeah,
that's awesome. Hey, I'll take it. 34th pick is absolutely nothing to be ashamed of, man.
No. Yeah. Absolutely.
We'll take it. But we love that guy, obviously. You know, being an in-state guy makes it even more special. So
yeah.
All right, Max. Exactly. Again, everyone check out Max's work at pff.com, Preferred Walk-On, soon to be PFF's College Football Show. So check him out at Max Chadwick, CFB, and it's at Max Chadwick, CHADWICK, for those who were listening. CFB. Max, thank you again for coming on.
Of course. Thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely. Have a good day, everybody. Have a top shelf day in Q Country Roads.